There's a drawer in most American homes. You probably know the one, where important papers go to become mysterious. Insurance cards from 2019. A warranty for a microwave nobody owns anymore. Maybe a will, maybe not. And somewhere in that drawer, or maybe nowhere at all, is the answer to a question your family will absolutely have to answer someday, possibly on one of the worst days of their lives, while also trying to figure out how to feed people and park cars and hold it together in public. Nobody told you this was going to be part of the deal when you hit your 50s. Nobody handed you a manual. You got a mortgage once, and someone walked you through that for hours. But this? The thing that actually matters? You're mostly supposed to figure it out yourself, in between everything else, while pretending it isn't a little bit terrifying. Here's the quiet truth nobody says out loud. Planning your legacy isn't really about dying. It's about living on purpose. It's about deciding, while you still can, while your mind is clear and your preferences are your own, what you want your life to have meant, who gets the good lamp, and how you want the people you love to feel when it's over. Not sad, not scrambling, not arguing at a conference table with a lawyer they just met. The word legacy has gotten a little overworked. It sounds like it belongs to presidents and billionaires, like it requires a foundation with your name on it, or at least a scholarship fund. It doesn't. Your legacy is the sum total of how you treated people, what you built, what you left behind in every sense of the word, and whether the people who loved you spent the years after you were gone honoring that or untangling it. Most of us are somewhere in the middle of life right now, which means we're old enough to have buried some people and young enough to still feel a little surprised when we do. We've stood in those family kitchens after funerals, eaten the casseroles, watched uncles go quiet and cousins get weird about the jewelry. We've seen what happens when nobody planned. We've also, maybe, seen the rare family where everything was clear, where the person who died had taken care of things, and even in the grief, there was a kind of peace underneath. That peace is available to you. It's not complicated, but it does require you to do something most people keep finding reasons to put off. Let's start with the practical layer, because that's the foundation everything else sits on. If you don't have a will, you need one. This is not news to you. You've known this for a while. And yet, statistically, if you're an American, there's a better than even chance you don't have one, or the one you have is 15 years old and still mentions someone you divorced or an account that doesn't exist anymore. The reasons people give are all variations on the same thing. It feels like scheduling your own bad news. But here's how to reframe it. A will isn't a document about dying. It's a document about control. It's you saying, while I still have a voice, here's what I want. Without it, your state has a voice instead, and your state doesn't know you from anyone. It doesn't know that your daughter should get the ring, or that your brother would actually take good care of the dog. Getting a basic will done is not the ordeal people imagine. An estate attorney can do a simple one in a couple of appointments. If your situation isn't complicated, no business, no blended family complexities, no significant assets in multiple states, you're probably looking at somewhere between $300 and $1,000. Yes, you can do it online for less. Whether that's right for your situation depends on your situation, but the cost of doing nothing is paid by your family, and not in dollars. While you're in that attorney's office, do two other things that most people skip. Get a durable power of attorney and get a healthcare directive. The power of attorney designates who can handle your financial affairs if you can't, because sometimes life doesn't give you a graceful exit. Sometimes there's a period of incapacity, and if nobody has the legal authority to pay your bills or make decisions, things get frozen in ways that are genuinely brutal for families to deal with. The healthcare directive, sometimes called a living will or an advance directive, tells doctors what you want if you're in a serious medical situation and can't speak for yourself. It also names someone to make those decisions on your behalf. You've probably been in a doctor's office recently. You know how fast those appointments move. Your doctor is already reaching for the door before you've finished your sentence. Now imagine a version of that, but in an ICU, at 3 in the morning, with your family in a waiting room that smells like old coffee, and some resident asking your spouse what you would have wanted. Do you want to be kept on life support indefinitely? What's your position on aggressive intervention versus comfort care? These are not abstract questions. They're the questions that wreck families when there's no answer on paper. Write down your answer, sign it, give your doctor a copy, give the person you named a copy. Put a copy in that drawer, but this time, tell someone it's there. Now here's something people do even less often than the legal paperwork, and it matters just as much. Have the actual conversation. Not a formal sit-down, not a family meeting with an agenda. Just tell the people who need to know what you want. Tell your spouse or your partner. Tell your adult kids, or at least one of them you trust to pass it along. Don't make it a big production. You don't need to cry. You can do it over dinner or on a drive or just standing in the kitchen. You can start by saying you've been getting your paperwork in order and you want them to know where things are. That's the door. Once it's open, it's usually easier than people think. The reason this conversation feels hard is that we've collectively decided that talking about death means inviting it. It doesn't. Death is coming whether you discuss it or not. The conversation doesn't change the timeline. What it changes is whether the people you love are left guessing or left knowing. Tell them where the documents are. Tell them who your attorney is, who your accountant is, who handles your insurance. Tell them the passwords, or at least tell them where the passwords are written down. This sounds mundane. It is not mundane. When someone dies, the amount of administrative chaos that follows is staggering, and most of it is made significantly worse by not knowing where things are. Your family will spend hours, sometimes days, sometimes weeks, trying to locate accounts, cancel subscriptions, notify institutions. A single document, a one-page list of what you have and where it is and who to call, is one of the most loving things you can leave behind. It costs nothing. It takes an afternoon. But the legacy that actually lasts isn't in a filing cabinet. That's the part that surprises people when they think it through. 20 years after you're gone, nobody is thinking about your investment accounts. What they're thinking about are the moments, the things you said that stayed with them, the way you handled something hard, what you believed, and whether you lived like you believed it. This is the part that most legacy planning completely ignores because it's harder to package, but it's what people actually hunger for. The research on grief, and there's a lot of it, consistently shows that what bereaved family members say they most wish they had was more of their person, more of their voice, more of their stories, more of knowing who they really were. You have a chance to give people that. Not posthumously in some melancholy way, but actively, right now, as part of how you live the next decade or two. One of the simplest ways to do this is to write things down. Not your whole life story, unless you want to, in which case, please do. But pieces. The stories that only you know. Where you came from. What you wanted when you were 20 and how that changed. What you got wrong and what you'd do differently, what you got right, what scared you, what you're proud of. Nobody else has these stories. When you're gone, they're gone. Writing them down, even badly, even in fragments, even in a notebook nobody sees until later, is an act of profound generosity toward the people who come after you. There are apps now that help with this. There are services that record oral histories. There are simple, prompted journals sold at every bookstore that are basically, answer these questions, hand the book to your grandchildren. The medium doesn't matter. What matters is that you do it. And what usually stops people is feeling like their life isn't interesting enough to be worth recording. Let me be direct about this. You are wrong. Every life is interesting from the inside out. Every person who knew actual history as it happened, who lived through particular decades in particular places, doing particular things, has something irreplaceable in their head. Get it out of there and on to something that lasts. If writing isn't your thing, record yourself talking. Your phone does this. Your laptop does this. You could sit in your car and talk for 20 minutes about what your childhood home smelled like, or what your father was really like, or what it felt like the day your first child was born, or what you believe about how to live a good life. Then save it somewhere and tell someone it exists. 40 years from now, a grandchild or great-grandchild you may never meet will hear your actual voice. Think about that for a moment. There is no price on that. The legacy conversation also involves money, and not just in the obvious ways. One of the most common sources of family conflict after a death, this has been documented thoroughly, and also anyone who's been through it knows it in their bones, is inequality in inheritances, or the sense of inequality, or the feeling that one sibling got more attention or more access or more of the intangibles. None of this has to be your family's story, but it requires you to think ahead. If you have more than one child, think carefully about how you want things distributed and why. And then, this is the part people skip, tell them while you're alive. Not to justify yourself, not to start a debate, but because secrets have a way of becoming wounds, and because adults generally handle difficult information better when they can ask questions and have the conversation while you're still there to have it. If one child is getting less because you've already helped them more financially during your lifetime, say that. If you're leaving a particular item to a particular person for a particular reason, say that. The story behind the decision matters as much as the decision, maybe more. If you have a complicated family, and at this age, who doesn't really, a blended family, estranged relationships, a child with special needs, a sibling you've been helping support, get professional help thinking through the structure. Not because it's going to be easy, but because doing it sloppily is the guaranteed route to the kind of family fallout that lasts for generations. An estate attorney and possibly a financial planner who specializes in this are worth every dollar because they've seen every version of these situations and they know where the landmines are. Let's talk about the non-financial legacy piece that most people don't name as legacy but absolutely is. Your relationships and what state you want them to be in. There's a version of this that's about repair. If you have a relationship that's been strained or broken, and after 50 years of living, most people have at least one, you already know how it weighs on you. You probably think about it more than you let on. The question of whether to try to repair it is genuinely complicated, and there's no universal answer. But what I can tell you is that most people, at the end of life, regret the estrangements more than they regret the attempts at repair that didn't work out. Most people, looking back, wish they'd reached first, not because the other person deserved it, but because they deserved to have tried. This doesn't mean calling someone who's been abusive or genuinely harmful and reopening that door. It means being honest with yourself about what you can live with and what you want your children and grandchildren to inherit in terms of the emotional architecture of your family, because they do inherit it. The grudges that outlive us don't disappear. They move into the next generation and become something nobody quite understands anymore, but everyone feels. There's also a legacy of values, which is a little harder to talk about without sounding grandiose, but which is actually quite simple in practice. What do you believe? What do you stand for? How did you live? And how do you want to be remembered living? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're worth sitting with, and more than that, they're worth expressing, not in a lecture to your family, but in how you act in front of them, what you say, what you prioritize, what you get off the couch for, what you refuse to be silent about. The older I watch people get, and I've watched a lot of them, The more I notice that the ones who feel good about their legacies are almost never the ones who accumulated the most. They're the ones who paid attention, who showed up, who said the hard things kindly, who loved specifically, not generally, not abstractly, but in the particular ways that the people they loved actually needed. They wrote the letter. They made the call. They stayed at the table a little longer. Legacy is not a project you finish. It's a practice you sustain. The documents matter. The conversations matter. The stories matter. And yes, the estate planning matters. But none of it is a substitute for the ongoing business of being a person who people will genuinely grieve and genuinely celebrate when the time comes. So here's what I'd actually do if I were you, right now. Pick the one thing on this list that you've been avoiding the longest. Just one. If you don't have a will, call an estate attorney this week, not next month, this week, and put it on the calendar in ink. If your will is 10 years old, pull it out and read it and figure out what needs updating. If you've been meaning to have the conversation with your kids, have it. Not perfectly, just have it. If you have stories in your head that nobody has ever written down, sit down tonight with a piece of paper or a recording app and start with the one you've thought about the most. You've spent 50 or 60 or 70 years accumulating a life. The people who love you deserve to have that life, all of it. The paperwork and the stories and the values and the love handed to them clearly, thoughtfully, on purpose. Not found in a drawer, not reconstructed from fragments, not argued over at a table with a stranger. The kindest thing you can do for the people who are going to miss you is to make it easy for them to honor you. Give them what they need. Tell them what you want. Leave them something more than questions. That's not saying goodbye. That's the whole point. It's the opposite. It's the way you stay.